Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova and watched the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The Galactic Council station was bigger than any city on Earth, and it hung in space like a silver jewel against the stars. Jake had trained for this moment his whole life, but seeing it with his own eyes still took his breath away. The communication officer turned to him with wide eyes. "Captain, we are getting a signal from the station." "Put it on screen," Jake said, and tried to keep his voice steady. The screen flickered and showed a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. Its voice came through the speakers in perfect English. "Welcome humans to the Galactic Council. I am Ambassador Zethka of the Zephyrian Union. We have been waiting for your arrival." Dr. Lisa Carter stepped forward from her station. She was the mission's top scientist and had studied every piece of alien data they had received. "Ambassador, this is an honor. We come in peace and hope to learn from your great civilization." The alien's large eyes seemed to smile. "Your species shows promise. Dr. Carter, we have prepared quarters for your delegation. Please follow the guidance signals to Docking Bay 7. Jake nodded to his pilot, Commander Alex Brooks, who carefully guided their ship toward the station. The docking process took an hour, and Jake used the time to go over their mission one more time with his team. They were here to represent all of humanity and make a good first impression. When they finally stepped off their ship, the delegation was met by 3 different aliens. Ambassador Zethka was there, along with a massive creature that looked like a walking tank covered in spikes and scales. The third alien was thin and gray with a large head and moved like it was floating. "Allow me to introduce War Leader Krextar of the Krex Dominion," Zethka said, pointing to the large creature, "and Scholar Prime Voxthon of the Vithani Collective." War Leader Krextar looked down at the humans and snorted. "These are the new species. They look weak and have no natural weapons. How did they even reach space?" Scholar Prime Voxthon moved closer, and its large black eyes studied each human carefully. "Interesting. Their biology is quite diverse compared to most species. Their brain activity shows unusual patterns, very adaptable." Dr. Carter smiled and stepped forward. "We humans are indeed diverse. We come from many different backgrounds and cultures, but we work together toward common goals." "Fascinating," said Voxthon. "Most species achieve unity through genetic similarity or hive minds. Your approach is unique." Jake could tell that the aliens were trying to figure out what kind of threat humanity might pose. "We are peaceful by nature," he said. "We prefer to solve problems through cooperation rather than conflict." War Leader Krextar laughed, and the sound echoed through the docking bay. "Peaceful species rarely survive long in the galaxy human. The universe is full of dangers that require strength to overcome." Commander Brooks straightened up. "We may not look strong, but humans have faced many challenges on our world. We have survived ice ages, natural disasters, and even wars among ourselves. We always find a way to adapt and overcome." The tour of the station took most of the day, and Jake was amazed by what he saw. The Galactic Council represented over 800 different species from across the galaxy. There were areas of the station built for creatures that lived underwater and others for beings made of energy. The technology was beyond anything humans had imagined. In the evaluation chamber, the 3 alien representatives ran tests on the human delegation. They measured their physical strength, reaction times, and intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Martinez showed them human military training, while Ambassador Kate Sullivan demonstrated their diplomatic skills. "Their physical capabilities are average," reported War Leader Krextar. "No natural armor weapons or enhanced senses. Their technology is primitive compared to most council members." Scholar Prime Voxthon looked at the results with interest. "However, their psychological profiles are unusual. They show high levels of creativity, problem-solving ability, and something the computer translates as stubbornness or determination. Ambassador Zethka reviewed all the data and made notes on a floating tablet. Based on our evaluation, we classify humanity as Category 3, minimal threat level with high potential for integration into galactic society. Jake felt both relieved and slightly insulted by the classification. Humanity had been judged as harmless, which was good for peaceful relations, but part of him wondered if they were being underestimated. "What does this classification mean for our people?" asked Dr. Carter. "You will be assigned a small sector in the outer rim of the galaxy," explained Zethka. "Standard protocol for new species. You may establish colonies, trade with other council members, and participate in cultural exchanges. If you prove yourselves over time, you may earn full membership." Status: War Leader Krextar was already losing interest. Another peaceful species for the Outer Rim. At least they seem more promising than the Harmony people who refuse to even defend themselves. The meeting concluded with formal documents being signed, and Jake felt the weight of history on his shoulders. Humanity had officially joined the galactic community. Even if they were starting at the bottom of the ladder, as they returned to their ship that evening, Jake stood again on the bridge and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there among those points of light were worlds that would become new homes for humans. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders they had never imagined. "What do you think, Captain?" asked Dr. Carter. "Are we ready for this?" Jake thought, about all the challenges that lay ahead. Building new colonies, learning alien technologies, and proving that humanity deserved a place among the stars. "I think we are about to find out, Dr. Carter. I think we are about to find out." 3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and life in the Outer Rim was peaceful. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the human patrol ship Defiant on routine border surveillance missions. The ship was small compared to alien vessels, but it was fast and reliable. Ryan and his crew had grown comfortable with their quiet sector of space. The morning started like any other, with Ryan reviewing patrol reports over coffee in his quarters. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez knocked on his door with the daily briefings. "Captain, we have completed scans of the Kepler system and found nothing unusual. Trade ship traffic is normal and all colonies are reporting green status." Ryan nodded and was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls as Ryan rushed to the bridge. "Report!" he called out as he took his command chair. "Sir, we are receiving distress signals from the outer edge of Council space," said Communications Officer Danny Roberts. "Multiple signals all saying the same thing. Something is attacking the frontier colonies." Ryan frowned. Attacks on Council territory were extremely rare. The galaxy had been at peace for over 3,000 years. "Can you get more details on these signals?" "Most of them cut off mid-transmission, Captain," Danny replied. "But I managed to piece together fragments. Ships unlike anything in Council records, massive in size and hostile in intent." Dr. Chris Martinez looked up from his science station. "Captain, I am detecting unusual energy readings from long-range sensors. Something very large is moving through the outer systems." Ryan made a decision that would change everything. Set course for the nearest distress signal. Maximum warp. The Defiant jumped to faster-than-light travel and crossed 3 star systems in less than an hour. When they dropped back to normal space, Ryan and his crew stared in horror at what they found. The Harmony colony had been home to 2 million peaceful aliens who spent their lives creating beautiful art and music. Now there was nothing left but debris floating in space. "My God," whispered Dr. Martinez. "The entire planet is gone. Where the world had been, there was only a expanding cloud of dust and metal fragments. Massive ships, unlike anything in Council records, moved through the wreckage like predators feeding on prey. The ships were dark and covered in what looked like organic growths. They pulsed with evil red light and seemed to be consuming the planetary. "Debris! Captain, those ships are heading our way," called out navigator Susan Clark. They have detected us, Ryan watched, as 3 of the alien vessels turned toward the Defiant. Each ship was 10 times larger than his patrol vessel and bristled with weapons. All hands to battle stations. Prepare to transmit everything we record. Back to Council space. The battle was brief and terrifying. The enemy ships fired beams of energy that seemed to eat through the Defiant's shields like acid. Ryan ordered evasive maneuvers, but the alien vessels were faster than they looked. One beam struck the ship's hull, and Ryan watched in horror as the metal began to dissolve. "Hull breach on Deck 3, reported Engineer Tony Miller. "The beam is converting our hull material into something else. Emergency jump to hyperspace," Ryan ordered. "Get us out of here now." The Defiant escaped just as the alien ships closed in for the kill. During the jump back to Council space, Ryan reviewed the recordings they had made. The enemy ships were like nothing in the galactic database. They seemed to be part machine and part living creature. Worse, they appeared to be converting matter from destroyed worlds into new ships. Admiral Chen Wei of the Galactic Defense Force received Ryan's report with growing alarm. The conference room in Council headquarters was filled with representatives from every major species. War leader Krextar paced back and forth like a caged animal, while Scholar Prime Voxthan studied the tactical data. "This enemy fleet appeared from dark space," explained Admiral Chen. "Our long-range sensors detected nothing until they began attacking. They have already destroyed 17 colonies and show no signs of stopping." General Marcus Stone represented Earth's military forces at the emergency meeting. "What do we know about their capabilities, Admiral?" "According to Captain Foster's report, these ships can convert matter into energy and use it to create more vessels. They appear to be some kind of machine intelligence with one goal: consume everything in their path." Ambassador Zethka looked pale as he reviewed the casualty reports. "The Harmony people had no defenses. They believed in pure pacifism and refused to maintain any military forces." War leader Krextar slammed his massive fist on the table. "Pacifism is weakness. These devourers, as the computer has named them, will not be stopped by kind words and peaceful intentions." Dr. Amy Rodriguez had been studying the enemy technology since the Defiant returned. "Based on our scans, these ships learn and adapt to any weapon used against them. Each time we fire on them, they become more resistant to that type of attack." The implications were terrifying. An enemy that could not be defeated by conventional means was heading toward the heart of Council space. Fleet Commander Silara of the Zephyrian Navy spoke up from her position at the far end of the table. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols. If these devourers cannot be stopped, then our priority should be saving as many lives as possible." General Stone shook his head. "Evacuation to where, Commander? If they consume galaxies as the intelligence reports suggest, then running will only delay the inevitable." Major Susan Clark had been quietly studying star charts during the discussion. "General, what if we could find a way to coordinate the defense? Use every species' strengths together instead of fighting separately." Scholar Prime. Voxthan's large eyes focused on the human officer. "An interesting proposal, Major, but our species have different fighting styles and technologies. The Krex prefer direct assault, while the Vethani use defensive strategies. Coordination has never been attempted on this scale." Admiral Chen stood and activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked the Devourer advance, while blue areas showed Council territory. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have perhaps 6 months before the main enemy fleet reaches the core worlds. We need to decide now whether we fight or flee." Captain Jenna Walsh, who commanded a human transport vessel, raised her hand. "Admiral, what about a fighting retreat? We evacuate civilians while our military forces slow down the enemy advance." "The Devourers move too fast, Captain," replied Admiral Chen. "Our simulations show they will overtake any evacuation fleet within weeks." The debate continued for hours, but no clear solution emerged. Each species had different ideas about how to face this threat, and time was running out. The Devourers were Coming and the galaxy was not ready. As the meeting ended, Ryan Foster found himself thinking about the destroyed Harmony colony. 2 million beings who had lived in peace for centuries, wiped out in minutes by an enemy that showed no mercy. The recordings from the Defiant showed ships that seemed to hunger for destruction. War was coming to the galaxy whether they wanted it or not. The question was whether anyone would survive to remember what peace had been like. The Devourers were awakening from dark space, and they brought with them a storm that would test every species in ways they had never imagined. The calm years were over, and the real test was about to begin. The main Devourer fleet arrived exactly 6 months after the first attacks, and it was larger than anyone had imagined. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the Council flagship, watching the enemy approach on long-range sensors. The display showed over 3 million hostile contacts stretching across multiple star systems like a dark tide consuming everything in its path. "Admiral, the enemy fleet has reached Kepler Station," reported Communications Officer Linda Baker. The defense fleet is moving to intercept Kepler Station was the Council's main military outpost in the Outer Rim. 50,000 ships from every member species had gathered there for the galaxy's first major stand against the Devourers. War leader Krextar commanded the Krex battle groups, while Fleet Commander Silara led the Zephyrian forces. Even the mysterious ethereal collective had sent their crystal ships to join the fight. Commander Tim Johnson piloted his human fighter squadron alongside alien forces as they approached the enemy. The Devourers' ships were even more terrifying up close. Each vessel looked like a fusion of machine and living tissue, with tendrils that reached out to grab nearby matter. The largest ships were the size of moons and pulsed with hungry red energy, all. "Squadrons, this is Admiral Chen," came the voice over the communication channel. "Remember, these enemies adapt to our weapons, so rotate your attack patterns frequently. Show them what the galaxy can do when we stand together." The battle began with long-range bombardments from the Council fleet. Krex warriors fired their plasma cannons, while Vithani ships launched swarms of smart missiles. The Zephyrian vessels used their advanced beam weapons, and human ships added their nuclear torpedoes to the assault. For a moment, it looked like the combined firepower might work. Then the Devourers began to adapt. Their hulls shifted and changed, becoming resistant to each type of weapon within minutes. The plasma that had torn through their armor now bounced off harmlessly. The smart missiles that had found their targets were now intercepted by new defensive systems that appeared like magic. "This is impossible," called out Krex Battle Commander Thexra over the radio. "Our most powerful weapons are becoming useless." Tim Johnson watched his squadron's missiles explode harmlessly against a Devourer cruiser that had adapted to human technology. "Command, this is Johnson. Our conventional weapons are not working. The enemy is learning too fast." Dr. Chris Martinez was monitoring the battle from his science station aboard a human support ship. "Admiral, I am detecting massive energy surges from the Devourer fleet. They are not just adapting to our weapons, they are using the energy from our attacks to power their own systems." The situation went from bad to catastrophic as the Devourers began their counterattack. Beams of consuming energy reached out from their ships and began dissolving Council vessels. The proud Krex battleships that had never known defeat melted like ice under the enemy fire. Vithani cruisers with their advanced shields lasted only seconds longer. Captain Jenna Walsh was commanding a human medical ship when she saw 3 damaged alien cruisers trying to escape the battle zone. Their engines were failing, and Devourer pursuit ships were closing in fast. "Medical ship Aurora to damaged vessels. We are coming to assist." "Human ship, you cannot help us," called back the Krex captain. "Your vessel has no weapons and no armor. Save yourselves." Jenna ignored the warning and maneuvered her ship between the damaged cruisers and their pursuers. The Aurora was not built for combat, but it was fast and had strong shields designed for rescue operations. "All crew, hold on. We are going to try something crazy." She used the medical ship's tractor beams to grab the 3 damaged vessels and began pulling them away from the battle. The Devourer ships fired their consuming beams, but the Aurora's unique shield configuration scattered the energy. For reasons no one understood, the medical ship's defenses worked better against the enemy than military shields. "How are they doing that?" asked the Vithani captain over the radio. "Our warships could not withstand those weapons." Dr. Amy Rodriguez, who was aboard the Aurora, had been studying the enemy beams. "Captain, I think the Devourer weapons are designed to consume military-grade materials. Our medical ship uses different alloys and energy patterns. They have not adapted to civilian technology yet. The rescue was successful, but the larger battle was a disaster. The Council fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that learned from every attack. Even the Ethereal Collective's mysterious crystal ships were no match for the Devourers, who seemed to consume energy itself. Admiral Chen made the hardest decision of his career. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. General retreat, fall back to the secondary defense line." The withdrawal was chaotic as surviving ships tried to escape the advancing Devourers. Tim Johnson's fighter squadron provided cover for the retreating fleet, but they were running out of options. The enemy had adapted to everything the galaxy could throw at them. General Marcus Stone received the battle reports from Earth's command center with growing concern. "How many ships did we lose?" he asked Colonel Danny Roberts. "Over 30,000, Admiral. Nearly 60% of our entire fleet. The Kreks lost most of their heavy cruisers, and the Vithani defensive wall was completely shattered." Dr. Sophie Clark looked up from her analysis of the battle data. "General, the enemy learned to counter our weapons faster than we predicted. At this rate, they will be unstoppable by the time they reach the core worlds." The survivors of Kepler Station limped back to Council space carrying news of the defeat. War leader Krextar was badly wounded and his pride was shattered. "We threw everything at them," he told the emergency session. "Our most advanced weapons, our best strategies, our finest warriors. Nothing worked." Scholar Prime Voxton studied the tactical recordings with growing despair. "The Devourers are not just machines. They are a perfect predator designed to consume advanced civilizations. Every technological advantage we possess becomes useless within hours of contact." Ambassador Zethka looked around the conference room at the defeated faces of the galaxy's leaders. "Then what do we do? How do we fight an enemy that cannot be fought?" Major Susan Clark, who had survived the battle aboard a human cruiser, spoke up from her position near the back of the room. "Maybe the problem is that we are trying to fight them like civilized species. What if we need to think differently?" Fleet Commander Silara shook her head. "Major, we used every tactic in our military databases. Coordinated attacks, defensive formations, even ramming maneuvers. The Devourers adapted to all of them. But what if we use tactics that are not in any database?" Susan continued. "What if we fought like animals instead of advanced beings?" The suggestion was met with uncomfortable silence. The galaxy's civilized species had spent thousands of years developing advanced warfare based on logic efficiency and minimal casualties. The idea of abandoning everything they had learned seemed impossible. Dr. Chris Martinez cleared his throat. "Major Clark might have a point. The Devourers were clearly designed to fight advanced civilizations. But what if they encounter something unexpected? Something that does not follow standard patterns?" War leader Krextar growled from his medical bed. "You suggest we abandon all strategy and tactics? Fight like primitive beasts, maybe," said Susan. "Maybe that is exactly what we need to do." The evacuation fleets were almost ready when Colonel Danny Roberts presented his proposal to the emergency council session. The massive conference room was filled with the galaxy's remaining military leaders, all of them tired and desperate after the disaster at Kepler Station. Most species were preparing to abandon their outer colonies and retreat toward the galactic core. "Honored delegates," Danny began as he stood before the assembled aliens. Earth requests permission to engage the next Devourer probe force with human tactics and human leadership. War Leader Krextar looked up from his medical bed where he was recovering from his wounds. Colonel, your species has the smallest and weakest fleet in the Council. How can you succeed where we have failed? Dr. Amy Rodriguez stepped forward with data tablets in her hands. Because we do not think like you do, War Leader. Human military. Doctrine is based on different principles than galactic standard tactics. Scholar Prime Voxthon leaned forward with interest. Explain these principles, Dr. Rodriguez. Acceptable losses, Amy said simply. Every other species in the galaxy tries to minimize casualties and preserve expensive ships and equipment. Humans are willing to sacrifice everything if it means completing the mission. Fleet Commander Sil'ara shook her head. That is not tactics, Colonel, that is madness. No civilized species throws away lives and resources unnecessarily, General Marcus. Stone, who had arrived from Earth, spoke up from his position near the front of the room. Commander, with respect, your civilized approach just lost 60% of our combined fleet. Maybe it is time to try something uncivilized. The debate continued for hours, with most alien representatives opposing the human request. They had seen humanity's small ships and basic weapons during the first battle. How could primitive tactics succeed against an enemy that had adapted to the galaxy's most advanced technology? Admiral Chen Wei finally called for a vote. The humans are asking for one chance to prove their methods. We will allow Captain Nicole Anderson to lead a human battle group against the next Devourer scout force. If they fail, we proceed with full evacuation. 3 days later, Captain Nicole Anderson stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Aurora and watched the Devourer probe. Force approach on her sensors. 5 enemy ships, each the size of a city, were advancing through the Proxima system. Behind her were 12 human vessels and crews who had volunteered for what everyone expected to be a suicide mission. Captain, the alien observers are requesting tactical data, reported Communications Officer Pete Williams. Admiral Chen wants to know our battle plan. Nicole smiled grimly. Tell them our battle plan is to win, Pete. Details would just confuse them. The Devourer ships detected the human fleet and began their standard adaptation protocols. Their hulls shifted to defend against the weapons they had encountered in previous battles. Plasma-resistant armor formed on their surfaces along with defenses against energy beams and smart missiles. All ships, this is Captain Anderson, Nicole announced over the fleet communication channel. Remember what we discussed. We are not here to fight a battle. We are here to send a message. Lieutenant Mike Thompson commanded the destroyer Swift Arrow, and he was the first to engage. Instead of firing weapons at long range like normal tactics, demanded he accelerated his ship directly toward the largest Devourer vessel. Swift Arrow beginning attack run. The Devourer ship fired its consuming beam at the approaching destroyer, but Mike had planned for this. He used his ship's emergency thrusters to spin the Swift Arrow while it charged forward. The beam struck the ship's armor but could not get a solid lock on the spinning target. This is insane, called out the Krex observer aboard one of the alien ships. The human is flying directly into enemy fire. Mike's ship struck the Devourer vessel at full speed, and both ships exploded in a massive fireball. The alien observers watched in shock as the human captain deliberately rammed his ship into the enemy. No civilized species used ramming attacks because they meant certain death for the attacking crew. The Devourer fleet paused as their computer systems tried to process what had happened. Their adaptation protocols were designed to counter weapons and tactics, not suicide attacks. How do you adapt to an enemy that uses their own ships as missiles? Sergeant Laura Baker was next with her assault transport loaded with human marines. Instead of engaging in ship-to-ship combat, she used her vessel's boarding pods to attach to a Devourer hull. Boarding party away. We are going inside. The Devourers had never faced boarding attacks before. Their ships were designed to fight at long range using energy weapons. Laura and her Marines cut through the hull and planted nuclear charges throughout the enemy vessel's core systems. "Charges set, Captain," Laura reported over the radio. 30 seconds to detonation." The Marines did not attempt to escape. They held their positions to make sure the charges went off even as the Devourer ship tried to purge them from its systems. The explosion tore the enemy vessel apart from the inside out. Dr. Sophie Clark was monitoring the battle from her science station aboard the Aurora. "Captain, the Devourer computers are showing massive system errors. They cannot adapt to tactics that involve deliberate self-destruction." The remaining human ships pressed their attack using methods that horrified the alien observers. Commander Andrew Davis ordered his crew to abandon ship in escape pods, then used remote control to crash his empty vessel into a Devourer engine section. Captain Lisa Johnson disabled her ship's safety systems and overloaded the reactor, creating a nuclear explosion that took out 2 enemy vessels. "They are all going to die," whispered Ambassador Zethka as he watched the battle from the Council command ship. "The humans are sacrificing their entire fleet." "No," said Admiral Chen, who was beginning to understand what he was seeing. "They are not sacrificing their fleet. They are turning their fleet into weapons." The final attack came from Captain Nicole Anderson herself. Her cruiser Aurora was the last human ship still fighting, and 3 Devourer vessels were closing in for the kill. Nicole looked around her bridge at the crew members who had volunteered to stay behind. "It has been an honor serving with all of you," she said quietly. "Helm set collision course for the center enemy ship. All power to engines." The Aurora accelerated toward the Devourers at maximum speed while Nicole transmitted a final message to the alien observers. "Tell the galaxy that humans do not surrender. Tell them we choose how we die." The cruiser struck. The lead Devourer ship in the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. When the light faded, all 5 enemy vessels were destroyed or disabled. The human battle group was gone, but they had achieved something the galaxy thought impossible. They had defeated the Devourer's war leader. Krex Tar stared at the tactical display in amazement. How did they do it? The Devourers should have adapted to their attacks. Dr. Chris Martinez had been studying the battle recordings. The Devourers were created by a logical species war leader. Their programming cannot process tactics that involve deliberate suicide. How do you adapt to an enemy that chooses death over defeat? Scholar Prime Voxthan was silent for a long moment as he processed what he had witnessed. The humans did not fight a battle. They fought a war. Their goal was not to survive, but to destroy the enemy, regardless of cost. The galaxy had learned something new about humanity that day. They were not the weakest species in the Council. They were the most dangerous because they were willing to pay any price for victory. The Devourers could adapt to any weapon, but they could not adapt to warriors who embraced death as a tool of war. Admiral Chen sent out new orders to every remaining Council fleet. "All ships prepare for human tactical training. We are going to learn how to fight like humans." Word of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. In council chambers, military academies, and refugee camps, the story was told and retold. Humans did not just fight the Devourers, they fought them with a fury that made no logical sense. Admiral Sandra White found herself in charge of training alien forces to think like humans, and it was the strangest assignment of her career. The key is to stop thinking about your ship as something valuable, she explained to a group of Krex officers in the training facility on New Mars. Your ship is not a home or a technological achievement. It is a weapon that you happen to be riding. War Commander Thexra, who had survived the disaster at Kepler Station, raised one of his massive arms. Admiral, this goes against everything we have learned about warfare. Ships are expensive and crews take years to train. How can we throw them away? Sandra pulled up a holographic display showing human military history. Because, Commander, sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. Look at these battles from our home world. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans died to delay a massive army. Kamikaze pilots who crashed their planes into enemy ships. The Alamo, where defenders fought to the death even though they knew they could not win. Dr. Jonathan Moore was working with Vithani scientists to develop new weapons based on human psychological warfare principles. The Devourers expect logical behavior, he explained as he showed them blueprints for unpredictable missiles. So we build weapons that do not follow logic. Random flight patterns, changing targets mid-course, and warheads that sometimes do not explode at all. Scholar Prime Voxton studied the human designs with fascination. These weapons are deliberately inefficient, Dr. Moore. Why would you create a missile that might fail to detonate? Because the Devourers cannot adapt to something. That does not work consistently, Jonathan replied. Their computer systems are trying to find patterns in chaos. It is like trying to solve a math problem where the numbers keep changing randomly. The real test came 3 months later at the Battle of Centaurus Prime. Commander Andrew Davis had been promoted to lead a mixed human-alien fleet defending one of the galaxy's most important trade centers. The Devourer attack force was smaller than the one that had destroyed Kepler Station, but it was still formidable with over 200 ships. All vessels, this is Commander Davis, Andrew announced as the enemy fleet approached. Today we fight, like humans. Remember your training and remember that victory matters more than survival. Captain Maria Santos commanded the human destroyer Eagle's Fury, and she had volunteered to lead the first wave of ramming attacks. Behind her flew ships from 6 different species, all of them prepared to sacrifice themselves for the mission. First wave beginning attack run, the Krex heavy cruiser. Bloodfang accelerated alongside the human ships with War Commander Thexra at the helm. 6 months ago, he would never have considered such tactics, but the defeat at Kepler had taught him hard lessons. For the honor of the galaxy, he called out, as his ship prepared to ram a Devourer command vessel, the Vithani frigate. Wisdom's Edge joined the attack using its new unpredictable weapons systems. The ship fired missiles that changed course randomly and dropped mines that sometimes exploded and sometimes released harmless fireworks. The Devourer adaptation systems went crazy trying to process the senseless attack patterns. Captain Tony Miller led the second wave in his cruiser Stormbreaker as the first ramming ships struck their targets. Explosions lit up space as both human and alien vessels crashed into the enemy fleet. The Devourers tried to adapt, but their programming could not handle opponents who treated death as just another tactical option. Wave 2 beginning suicide run, Tony announced calmly. It has been a pleasure serving with you all. Dr. Amy Rodriguez was monitoring the battle from the command ship and watching the Devourer response patterns with amazement. Commander, their adaptation systems are overloading. The enemy computers cannot process tactical suicide on this scale. The battle turned into something the galaxy had never seen before. Civilized species that had spent millennia perfecting efficient, logical warfare suddenly embraced the human approach of organized chaos. Zephyrian ships used their advanced technology to create more effective ramming attacks, while ethereal collective vessels turned their energy forms into living missiles. Lieutenant Colonel Paul Martinez commanded a group of human Marines who were using captured Devourer ships as weapons. They had boarded disabled enemy vessels and were piloting them into other Devourers in what he called recycling attacks. Nothing like using their own ships against them, he reported cheerfully. As another enemy vessel exploded, the Devourers began to retreat for the first time in their recorded history. Their perfect adaptation systems were failing against an enemy that refused to follow any logical pattern. Ships that should have surrendered when faced with certain death instead accelerated into ramming attacks. Weapons that missed their targets on purpose confused targeting computers designed for efficiency. Commander Davis, the enemy fleet is withdrawing, reported Navigation Officer Steve Cooper. They are actually running away. Andrew watched the Devourer, Ships flee on his tactical display and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. The galaxy had won its first major victory against the invaders, but the cost had been terrible. Over half the Council fleet was gone, including many ships that had deliberately sacrificed themselves. Admiral Chen Wei arrived at Centaurus Prime 3 days after the battle to survey the damage and debrief the survivors. "Commander Davis, your tactical report, please." "Sir, we stopped the Devourers by making them face something their programming could not handle," Andrew explained. "An enemy that chooses destruction over defeat. They can adapt to our weapons, but they cannot adapt to our willingness to die." The victory at Centaurus Prime changed everything. Council military academies began teaching human tactical philosophy alongside traditional strategies. The concept of acceptable losses became part of standard doctrine, even for species that had never considered such approaches. Captain Frank Anderson, who had survived the battle by ramming his damaged ship into a Devourer cruiser, found himself promoted to admiral and put in charge of training programs. "The hardest part is teaching aliens to stop being logical," he told his staff. "You have to think with your heart instead of your head." Fleet Commander Silara struggled with the new tactics during training exercises. "Admiral Anderson, this approach seems wasteful. Surely there must be more efficient ways to defeat the enemy?" Frank shook his head. "Commander, efficiency is what the Devourers expect from us. The moment we become predictable, they will adapt and start winning again. Our strength is not in being logical. Our strength is in being impossible to understand." The galaxy was learning, but there was still one more test to come. Long-range sensors had detected the main Devourer fleet approaching the inner systems. Millions of enemy ships were heading for the core worlds, including Earth itself. The real war was just beginning. Dr. Sophie Clark finished her analysis of all the recent battles and presented her findings to the Council leadership. "The Devourers are learning too," she warned. "They are starting to adapt to our chaos tactics. The next battle will be their final attempt to understand humanity." "Then we better make sure they never figure us out," said Admiral White as she looked at the star charts showing the approaching enemy fleet. "Because if they learn to think like humans, the galaxy is doomed." The final battle for the galaxy began in Earth's solar system when the main Devourer fleet arrived like a dark storm consuming the stars. Admiral Rebecca Turner stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance and watched millions of enemy ships spread across space from Mars to Jupiter. The assembled fleet of the galaxy floated before them, looking tiny by comparison, but every ship now fought using human doctrine. "All vessels, this is Admiral Turner," she announced on the fleet-wide channel. "Today we end this war one way or another. Remember your training, and remember that we fight not just for survival, but for the right to exist as free beings." Captain Frank Anderson commanded the assault group that would spearhead the attack on the Devourer Queen ship. The massive vessel was the size of Earth's moon and pulsed with the combined intelligence of the entire enemy fleet. If they could destroy it, the rest of the Devourer network would collapse. "Frank, this is insane. Even by human standards," called out war leader Krextar over the radio. His heavy cruiser Vengeance flew alongside the human ships as they prepared for the final attack. "That thing is protected by 1,000 smaller vessels." Frank checked his instruments one more time and thought about his wife and children back on Earth. "Then we go through all 1,000 Krextar. Whatever it takes." The battle began with the largest ramming attack in galactic history. Ships from every Council species accelerated toward the Devourer fleet at maximum speed, while their crews sang war songs, transmitted prayers, or simply screamed defiance at the enemy. The sight of an entire civilization choosing death over surrender broke something fundamental in the Devourer programming. Dr. Chris Martinez was monitoring the enemy network from his science station aboard the command ship. "Admiral, the Devourers are experiencing massive system failures. Their collective intelligence cannot process what they are seeing. Wave after wave of Council ships crashed into the enemy fleet in organized chaos. Vithani commanders who had once prized logic above all, else now led suicidal charges against ships 10 times their size. Zephyrian pilots abandoned their careful formations to ram enemy vessels while screaming ancient battle cries. Commander Kethra of the Vithani had once dismissed humans as primitive during first contact. Now he accelerated his science vessel toward a devourer battleship while his crew chanted equations that made no mathematical sense. "For the glory of organized madness," he called out as his ship struck the enemy, the devourer. Queen ship began to glow with dangerous energy as its computer systems tried to adapt to an enemy that made no logical sense. Beams of consuming fire reached out to destroy the approaching ships, but there were too many targets and they kept coming no matter how many were destroyed. Captain Steve Cooper led a group of human fighters through the chaos toward the Queen ship's core. "All squadrons, this is Cooper. We are going to fly directly into that thing and detonate our reactors inside its brain." "Steve, that is suicide," called back Lieutenant Jenny Walsh. "Even if we penetrate its defenses, we will never make it out alive." "Jenny, we were never supposed to make it out alive," Steve replied calmly. "The mission is to win, not to survive." The fighter squadron dove through the devourer defenses like bullets fired from a gun. Enemy fire destroyed half the ships, but the survivors kept flying deeper into the Queen ship's structure. They found the central core where the collective intelligence processed information and began their final attack. "Reactors overloading now," Steve announced as his fighter's engine began to glow white-hot. "Tell Earth that we remembered what it means to be human." The explosion tore through the Queen ship's core like lightning through a tree. The massive vessel shuddered and began to break apart as its controlling intelligence died in cascades of feedback. Around the battlefield, devourer ships suddenly stopped moving as their network connection failed. Admiral Turner watched the enemy fleet go dark on her tactical display. "All ships cease fire. The enemy has been defeated." The silence that followed was broken only by damage reports and casualty lists. The galaxy had won, but the cost had been terrible. Over 80% of the Council fleet was gone, including most of the human ships. Entire species had sacrificed themselves to save civilization. Dr. Amy Rodriguez completed her analysis of the final battle and presented her findings to the surviving leadership. The Devourers were created by a species that valued efficiency and logic above all else. They never encountered opponents willing to embrace destruction as a path to victory. War leader Krextar, who had survived by ramming his ship into 3 different enemy vessels, looked around the conference room at the few dozen beings who remained. "We have learned something today about the nature of warfare. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the strongest or the smartest, but the one who refuses to accept defeat." Scholar Prime Voxthan studied the wreckage of both fleets with new understanding. "The humans taught us that survival is not about being logical. It is about being willing to pay any price for freedom." In the months that followed, the galaxy slowly began to rebuild, but everything had changed. The careful, civilized approach to conflict that had dominated for millennia was replaced by human military philosophy. Academy textbooks now included chapters on tactical sacrifice and the strategic value of unpredictable behavior. Captain Lisa Johnson, who had somehow survived 4 different ramming attacks during the war, found herself teaching alien cadets about human psychology. The most important lesson is that your life belongs to something bigger than yourself, she explained to a class of young Krex warriors. "When you are willing to die for your cause, you become more dangerous than any weapon." Ambassador Kate Sullivan worked to establish new treaties between species based on lessons learned during the war. "We discovered that our differences make us stronger," she told the Reformed Council. "Logical species like the Vithani balance chaotic fighters like humans. Together we are unstoppable." Fleet Commander Silara struggled to adapt to the new military doctrines, but she was learning. "I still do not fully understand human tactics," she admitted to Admiral Turner. "How do you teach someone to embrace death?" As a strategy, Rebecca smiled sadly as she looked out at the stars where so many good people had died. "You do not teach it, Commander. You just hope that when the time comes, they will choose to do what is right instead of what is safe." Years passed and new threats emerged from distant galaxies, but when the call went out for defenders, the message was always the same. Send the humans and those who fight like humans. Send the species that learn to turn their own destruction into victory. Captain Tony Miller, now an admiral himself, commanded the new Galactic Defense Fleet and trained young officers from dozens of species. "Remember," he told them during graduation ceremonies, "you are not here to be the strongest or the smartest. You are here to be the most stubborn." The galaxy had learned fear during the war with the Devourers, but it was not fear of death or destruction. It was the fear that their enemies should feel when facing beings who would rather die than surrender. Humanity had taught civilization a simple lesson that echoed across the stars. When faced with extinction, some species run and some species hide. But humans stand their ground and fight until the very end. They taught the galaxy that the most terrifying words an enemy can hear are not threats of destruction, but a simple declaration of intent. We will not surrender. We will not retreat. We will win, or we will die trying. And in the vast darkness between, the stars that promise was enough to keep the nightmares away.